Great. Hope everyone's having a great evening. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the Climate Wins Here event, celebrating the IRA investments in Wisconsin and discussing implementation. My name is Will. I'm a Change the Chamber Climate Fellow, and I am on our live events and podcast team, and I'm going to be moderating this event tonight in conjunction with Evie Mangelko, another Change the Chamber Climate Fellow. She did a great job organizing this event, and she'll be doing a little bit at the end, speaking wise. So before we get into our main guests for the evening, I'm just going to go over our schedule so everybody has an idea of what to expect. So first, we're going to talk about what Change the Chamber is. I'm going to talk a little bit about our mission, our focus, why we focus on youth. And then I'm going to ask everybody now to please start writing their name. Well, you don't have to write your name, but put your location, your occupation. So if you're a college student, please put the university that you attend and what you study. And then if you're a recent graduate or just anyone, please put your occupation down. And then we'd like to hear what you're most excited about from the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and or what do you wish to see in future climate legislation? So once again, location, occupation, if you're a college student, university that you attend, and what your major is, and then what you're most excited for from the IRA, and what you wish to see in future climate legislation. Then we'll be hearing from three speakers. Our first speaker will be Andrew Pedikowski from the Climate Action Campaign. And then we'll be hearing from Andrew Worthman, city councilman from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And then we'll be hearing from Mayor Katie Rosenberg from Wausau, Wisconsin. And then Evie will take over for a few questions, and then we'll have a general Q&A for the rest of our time. So we encourage everybody to please put their questions in the chat. I also want to take this opportunity to ask everybody to please mute themselves. And once again, just to remind everybody, this is being recorded. You will all be getting a copy of this sent to you following our webinar. So with that being said, I'm going to start off with introducing CTC, or Change Your Chamber, to everybody. I'll try to say Change Your Chamber, but if I say CTC, at least you guys know it means Change Your Chamber. So Change Your Chamber is a nonpartisan coalition of young adults. So most of our climate fellows are either in college or, like myself, a recent college graduate. I've been with Change Your Chamber since last October. We have a great assortment of veterans like Evie, and we have a lot of new great members. So it's a really great organization where as the climate fellows, we kind of are driving. We're in the driver's seat, like what we want to, projects we want to work on, events we want to host, podcasts we want to host. It's really given a voice to a lot of youth, and we empower people to get beyond doom and gloom, to become climate change makers, environmental change makers. And we really encourage the youth to pursue meaningful change toward a sustainable future, which is, again, why we so target youth, because we want a sustainable future. And we have the most at stake as the youth. The future is ours, and we want to strive for a more sustainable and equitable future. Furthermore, CTC is a project of the U.S. Partnership for Education and Sustainable Development, which is a 501(c). So we follow those requirements as well. We are also a nonprofit. And this kind of is going to lead into our next guest, but at CTC, Change the Chamber, we're a member of Climate Action Campaign's Solutions for Pollution Coalition. So that's really why we focus on climate amongst other environmental topics. But, and I don't want to step on his toes too much, and I know Evie may say a little bit about this later, but pretty much we at CTC help to call on the Biden administration to carry out its responsibilities under our nation's bedrock environmental laws, such as the Clean Air Act, by advancing some of the approximately 20 protections across federal agencies that are out there that would cut climate pollution in half by 2030. So with that being said, again, I just want to encourage everybody, if they haven't already, to put all of those things down in the chat. And I'm going to introduce our first speaker again, Aaron Pedikowski from Climate Action Campaign, and he'll be discussing the Climate Wins campaign. including benefits for Wisconsin. So Aaron, excuse me, why don't you take it away?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Will. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here and talk about the work that's going on at the Climate Action Campaign. And yes, Change the Chamber has been a really valued partner in our work. And I really appreciated seeing everything that y'all have been able to accomplish alongside us. So, to discuss what our, work is together, I am on the partner engagement team at the Climate Action Campaign, which is a coalition of a dozen major environmental justice, public health groups working together to drive ambitious, durable federal action based on science to address the climate crisis. And as you mentioned, Solutions for Pollution, our coalition, is one of the ways that we work to reduce climate pollution. And our work, I think, expands even further than that into a couple different campaigns, which I'll talk about as well, which are here to reduce climate pollution and accelerate the transition to clean energy and a sustainable society that supports justice, jobs, improved health, and quality of life for all. So I'm really appreciative of working with Change the Chamber on these campaigns. In particular, I think something that's especially relevant today is the work that we're doing on our Climate Wins Here campaign. Basically, this campaign is a culmination of our legislative work over the past few years that sought to pass a bill that included a lot of major investments in climate that reduce emissions to help hit our goals of a 50% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And in order to hit our goals of a 50% reductions, we needed a bill that would enable a transition to clean energy. And through a lot of hard work, if y'all remember, there was the Build Back Better Act, and then the Reconciliation Bill, and we finally ended up with the Inflation Reduction Act, which is one of the really great investments that have come out that have really, really invested in climate. It is a historic climate investment. Last year on August 16th, we were really lucky to have that bill passed into law. So to talk about that investment, it's the single biggest investment in climate, communities, clean energy, and jobs ever. And it's really a fantastic piece of legislation because it lowers costs for families and helps slash climate pollution in the United States by an estimated 40% by the end of the decade. So we're really excited about that because it's a really ambitious amount that we need to be able to, mitigate the climate crisis that's going on worldwide. And getting 40% of our way to that goal is really significant. And I think that, in context of all the amount of droughts, hurricanes, severe flooding, wildfires that have gone on in the past, few years and longer, it's really reminded us of the ways that climate change has impacted the United States and even cost us up to $165 billion in 2021. So the need to do this and have this legislation is higher than ever. But unfortunately, at the same time, there's also been not enough information out there for everybody to actually be aware of these benefits. So it's really vitally important for us to educate and talk about how this piece of legislation is so impactful, because it's really going to be investing a lot in everyday people, and the benefits will really be felt to individuals. So some of the investments even coming to Wisconsin are, $1.4 million for clean energy and power, $29 million for clean transportation, $917,000 for environmental resilience and remediation, and $44 million from infrastructure. And a lot of that is coming from the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which are really great pieces of legislation that invest in Wisconsin and really will be having real impacts on how we get around, and it even will have real impacts on families in Wisconsin, with some estimates even ranging from a $300 to an $1,800 in annual savings from just the lower energy costs from these investments. So with all these investments that are coming to Wisconsin, it's this all happened 1 year ago. This money is coming out. It's coming out, we're going to see a lot of it coming in 2024. But another component of this is, making sure that these investments are actually being seen and felt. So one component of our Climate Wins Here campaign has been really celebrating the wins that have come from that. And earlier this month, we built a peak moment out of the 1 year anniversary of the Inflation Reduction Act. Climate Action Campaign hosted 13 events with 57 grasstop speakers and worked with 7 members of Congress to really celebrate the investments coming to a wide variety of places. And we even, saw some really good, pickups by the media, being able to have 73, different stories about this. And we're really proud to have that work because it's getting out to people and so they can see and be aware of these investments coming to their area. We even worked with, really happy to work with Congresswoman Gwen Moore and Congressman Mark Pocan. Yeah. And we were so happy to have them involved because it's really important for our legislators to speak up about this and be able to, stand by this piece of legislation, which they should really be interested in bragging about because it's so fantastic. But I think the other component of this now is that as we're looking forward into 2024, I just want to talk about the necessity to actually move from a place of celebrating these really fantastic investments to also asking people to be proactive in also taking a step to defend these investments, because as we look into the 2024 legislative year, the fiscal year, we're looking at the appropriations bill, and we're aware of the fact that it's likely going to be, attacked in terms of how those investments are actually going to be funded for the next year. So the big work that we're doing right now is to make sure that the investments that have come out from the Inflation Reduction Act are going to be funded by the Appropriations Committee. So there's a lot of pieces of this work that we're doing right now. In particular, we just had a letter that went out to Chairwoman Murray that spoke to the necessity to keep climate investments involved in the funding for the appropriations bill for this year. So we had 69 organizations come together to oppose measures that weaken programs aimed at alleviating pollution in overburdened communities. We oppose measures that cut agencies' core capacities so that they can't prevent environmental work from taking place. We're opposing measures that weaken or undermine the climate wins gained through the Inflation Reduction Act. And by sending this letter to Chairwoman Murray, we're really aiming to make sure that we are, having these be a top priority. And even more so, we're also targeting members of Congress currently to, make sure that they speak up and, protect legislation, protect the appropriations investments in climate and the Inflation Reduction Act, so that when 2024 comes around, we're actually seeing these investments go out and be able to benefit these different communities. So I might ask for anybody here today is that if you'd like to get more involved with, defending federal investments for climate and being involved with, participating in bringing more information and education about the Inflation Reduction Act, that's a big priority that we're looking for throughout the rest of the year and into 2024. So you feel free to email me. I'll put my email into the chat, and also I'm sure it'll be available post the recording as well. So thank you all so much for gathering here today, and I really appreciate the time from Change the Chamber.
Thank you so much, Aaron. That was all really, really important stuff. I totally agree. It's important to celebrate our climate wins when we have them, but we always have to be looking forward to the future and keep working to protect everything, especially with climate. So I just want to say for our audience that are going to be watching not live when they get the copy of this recording, we just put into the chat the link to Climate Action Campaign's priorities, which we'll talk about and provide more information for the Climate Wins campaign and the Solutions for Pollution campaign. So that's www.actionclimate.com/priorities. Once again, www.actionclimate.com/priorities. So with that being said, we're going to move into our next speaker. This is Andrew Worthman from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, who will be discussing the Farm Bill and agricultural benefits.
Thank you so much, Will, and Evie and the entire Change the Chamber team. My name is Andrew Worthman, and I'm a 14-year city council member here in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And I also serve as a representative for the Environmental Defense Fund covering the Midwest. I'm going to have some slides going up here shortly, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the Farm Bill, and specifically looking at the conservation pieces of the Farm Bill and how it kind of ties into a broader effort to address our climate crisis. And for some background, I grew up on a 600-acre dairy farm and vegetable farm here in Wisconsin. And so I saw firsthand really how financial and technical assistance programs can help farmers as they increase productivity on their farms, as they strive toward more sustainability of farming methods and conservation practices, and how they make their farms more resilient to climate change. As folks on this call may know, agriculture accounts for roughly 12% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So it really is critical that we address that piece of our society of thinking about how to reduce emissions. Today, the reality of climate change, from droughts to floods to forest fires and heat waves, really kind of necessitates that we take a stronger look at that. And so just a little bit of a roadmap, if you go to the next slide, please. Roadmap of what I'm going to cover today. Just some basics about the Farm Bill and how it's created. We're going to also shift focus then and talk about the conservation program specifically in the Farm Bill itself, and then explain a little bit about how the IRA funding, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, supports these existing programs. And then lastly, thinking about the conversation that is happening around the Farm Bill right now and what folks on the call can do to support these efforts. Next slide, please. So just a bit about the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is an omnibus package, a group of bills that are passed together roughly every 5 years. The last Farm Bill was passed in 2018, called the Agriculture Improvement Act, and it's set to actually expire at the end of this month. So, one thing to think about is just how timely this conversation is. Outside of the traditional agriculture development that most people think of, Farm Bill actually puts about 325 billion, roughly a quarter of the entire Farm Bill, is around nutrition programs. But today we're going to focus more on the conservation side of things, and that accounts for roughly 7% of the Farm Bill, but a very important 7%. Next slide, please. So in terms of conservation and why this matters, conservation is investment in really the future of agricultural industry while protecting our environment and ecosystems. And so, as I mentioned before, making sure that agriculture is done the right way and investing in conservation really reduces greenhouse gas emissions, but it also serves to make sure that our farms and farmers and growers are more resilient to severe weather and climate change. Techniques like reduced tillage or cover cropping, folks might have heard of on the phone, help to maintain and improve soil quality. It can promote long-term productivity and prevent soil erosion. And so when drought strikes, and this is something that's happening across the Midwest more and more each summer, there's less exposed ground and better soil structure, meaning that more moisture can be locked into the soil. If you think about flooding, which is Wisconsin's #1 natural disaster, it's made a lot worse by monocropped corn and beans. And what you see most of across the Midwest. So when you think about planting trees and native grasses and hedges along fields, maybe even taking low-lying areas out of agricultural production, it helps reduce flooding on farms, and that also helps reduce flooding downstream for communities that are nearby to farms. So on top of this, increasing biodiversity on farms is about carbon sequestration and mitigating the impacts of climate. Next slide, please. The conservation programs that are highlighted in the Farm Bill really fall into four categories. The Regional Conservation Partnership Program is focused on kind of a broader watershed approach to conservation improvement. So it's partnering nonprofits like NRCS and nonprofits like Land Stewardship, working with farmers to think about how to do conservation across watersheds. The CSP program, Conservation Stewardship, really is about rewarding farmers that are already doing some of these enhancements and making sure that they can continue doing them. ASEP, which is the Agricultural Easement Program, is helping to protect agriculture and viability in future generations as well. And EQIP is really around providing cost share so farmers can integrate some of these things like soil quality, reduction of water runoff, rainwater quality, and those kinds of things. And these programs, as I'll talk a little bit about, are widely used. Next slide, please. So it ties back into the Inflation Reduction Act because Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed in 2022, just over a year ago, actually doubled the amount of money, a 19.5 billion, that farmers and growers are going to see because of the legislation. It's a huge deal what the Inflation Reduction Act was able to accomplish in this regard. This doubling of money really helps, as you can kind of see the breakdown here in the different programs. This is money that is currently slated to go out to farmers, is already going out across places like Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and really truly across the country to help farmers invest in conservation. Next slide, please. So the kind of what we've come into at this point is, over the last few months, Congress has been crafting the new Farm Bill, and there has been opposition to the Inflation Reduction Act funding, and really an effort in some parts of the Republican caucus in the House to try to cut back on the amount of funding, either cut it fully from the Farm Bill or take it and put the funding into other places within the Farm Bill. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is meet bipartisan with members of the House and Senate to really say, look, these are programs that are incredibly beneficial to farmers. We can't afford to reduce them. And one of the things I want to point out for folks on the phone is that these are widely sought after programs. For example, EQIP only is able to supply about 31% of farmers who apply for that program. 42% of farmers who apply for the CSP grants are awarded. So it is really challenging to even meet all of the needs right now. There's certainly not room to make major cuts, which is what is being considered right now in Congress. Next slide, please. So again, just in closing, farming activity accounts for roughly 12% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And so it is a huge piece of the carbon equation. And so the good news is that farmers with support from programs like this are working to reduce their emissions. And one organization that is working to lead the way on this is FACA, the Food and Agricultural Climate Coalition, Alliance, and that is partners with the Environmental Defense Fund and part of climate action as well. So, this kind of work continues. I think one of the things that I would encourage everyone on the phone to consider doing is reaching out to their member of Congress and saying, look, nutrition programs are incredibly important. I want to see those continue, but also let's make sure that farmers have the tools in conservation that the Inflation Reduction Act provided for them. Please don't cut those programs as we come up on the deadline for renewal of the Farm Bill. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Andrew. That was very informative and really interesting stuff. And I'm sure Mayor Katie Rosenberg will have a lot to talk about as well on some of those matters that you discussed. That was all really interesting and super informative. I was captivated the whole time. So with that being said, I want to introduce our next guest, our final guest for the evening before we go into our Q&A. And I just want to keep reminding people to please put any questions they may have into the chat. Our next guest is going to be Mayor Katie Rosenberg from Wausau, Wisconsin, and she'll be discussing the removal of PFAS from Wausau's water, environmental justice, and greenhouse gas reduction initiatives.
Yeah. So I have some slides too. I think Evie's going to help me out maybe and show them. But hello, everyone. I'm Katie. I was elected to Wausau mayor in April of 2020. So right there, as COVID was starting, I came from the county board. So as you can see, there's my city. The river, the Wisconsin River divides us. So water is just surrounding us. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide and remind me what I've decided to talk about here, unless I can do it. No. Okay. Oh, I guess it's a little bio on me. So I was born here in Wausau. I grew up here. I went to high school here. I attended the local 2-year university. And then I went to Stevens Point, just about a half hour south of here, and got my bachelor's degree in philosophy and religious studies. And then I was working in news for a while. And then maybe a lot of you are too young for this, but Act 10 kind of made the state explode. I was working in media at the time, and I decided I could not be unbiased in covering that. My husband's a teacher. So I went and I got my master's degree in strategic communications, and we moved on. I worked for a Fortune 500 company for 7 years. And during that time, I was elected to the Marathon County Board for 2 terms. Fun fact, it is the largest county board in the nation with 38 members. So imagine trying to make decisions with 37 other people. Lots of fun. And then in April 2020, I was elected mayor. So the reason I care at all about these issues, it just starts with growing up here. Right, this big picture right here, those are my hiking buddies. We hike every Sunday. And this is a former 3M quartzite quarry where they pulled out a bunch of quartzite for like roofing shingles and a variety of things. But it's beautiful. It's in a state park. And so we hike there every Sunday. My grandma, I grew up here. She was a retired hippie for as long as I can remember. She was part of organic food movements in the 80s when it was really confusing for most of my friends. And then, I fortuitously had this professor, Ned Grossnickel. You can see him there on the Wisconsin River when I started my 2-year degree at local community college here. And it was an environmental studies class, and it blew my mind. And he paid for my first year of membership to the Sierra Club. And I've never looked back. I've been a member for more than 25 years at this point. So thanks, Ned. Thanks, Grandma. Thanks, Ribon State Park. So the first thing we started to do when it comes to the city and the policy side, you'll notice that Andrew is much nerdier and like deep in the policy, and I'm probably going to skirt over some of it, but I'm going to point out here, we created a sustainability, energy, environment committee. This was before me, but I supported it. The alder who represented me on city council at the time was my alder, and we talked a lot about this. So really cool. We wanted to make sure that we had people who were representing various areas of our community. We wanted it to be diverse. We wanted to make sure that it was people who came from all different kinds of backgrounds. So that's been going on maybe since 2017, possibly. And so, they've been kind of trying to figure out what they want to do with themselves. So we have this commission, and when I came in, they had been talking about some stuff, and they're like, what do we want to do? So I was like, well, let's do cool stuff. So if you want to scroll ahead, I can talk a little bit about some of the things that they've led the way on. Oh, this is a super easy one. There's a lady in our city, our community, who created this Better Bin app. And, everyone, recycling is probably not the best use of, your conservation efforts, but it's something we can do and people get into. So this app is great. You can scan whatever container it is that you have, and it'll tell you if you can recycle it here in Wausau. So it was super exciting. If you are a city, you can sign on to be part of it. It's possible that Andrew's part of it. I don't know. But people got real excited about it once we launched it. And I know that one of the really nerdy things they did before they launched this app was They audited people's recycling and garbage bins, which is a little creepy. But they kind of saw what people were struggling to figure it out, and it really helped. So, I mean, it kind of helped create some of this awareness. We have a new kind of recycling and garbage hauler, so it was good timing for all of this. But people got excited about it. I'm actually still getting tagged in things like, oh, I didn't know we could recycle raspberry containers. Again, like getting people to do something is step one. So that's what I'm going to talk about, kind of a lot of step ones that we've been taking. So on the next slide, we can talk a little bit more about another thing. All right, so I know that some of the city or the research has been challenged now regarding No Mow May. But when we did our first No Mow May effort, it looks like it was in 2021. People were so excited. They were not just excited to not mow their lawns. They were excited about the fact that they were part of something bigger than themselves. And I think that's why people get excited about the environment stuff in general. So these kids that you can see right here, they were so excited about helping the bees that I asked them if they wanted to ask this researcher, he's from Lawrence University, if they wanted to ask him questions that they had about why we should help save the bees. So it was really exciting. The whole community really got on board. We ran out of signs, I don't know, maybe 5 times. We had to get more signs. Just people were really excited to be a part of this. So again, another kind of step one, it rallied people around a cause together. And it was important that people started seeing it. Now we're going to be kind of looking over the research now to see what we do next year. It might not be No Mow May, it might be something else. But again, it was a start. So our next one, I think, is my favorite one. Yes. Okay. So this is my absolute favorite thing. So like you saw the picture at the beginning of my slideshow, we are surrounded by water. And I love walking around the city. We have a great river walk, and we have invasive species. We have buckthorn, we've got honeysuckle, we've got all these things, and it's right up to the river's edge. And up until even since I've been here, the Parks Department has been spraying to get rid of some of these invasive species. And I hate it. The more I thought about it, the more crazy I felt about the fact that we were using pesticides near the river. So I started looking around to other cities. What are you doing to control invasive species? And I saw Madison. And this in 2020, they had hired goats. And it was so adorable that it just pulled me in. And all I did was I tweeted this into existence. I started tweeting with these goats. The community started getting excited. Are we getting goats? Are we doing this? And we couldn't do it in 2020, but in 2021, when these farmers, they came from Almond, Wisconsin. These farmers showed up. We gave them like the royal welcome. They drove their trailer onto the island, and the goats just 50 goats came out of this tiny trailer, and they were with us for an entire month. And they ate all of not just the invasive species, but some of the vegetation that we would have had to get rid of anyway, mowing. And they ate and they ate, and the community got so excited about this. We actually, at the end of their time here, we had a little go-to-palooza where the farmers let all of the community members in to meet the goats. And the kids were so excited. We are right in the heart of dairy country too. So we had some cheesemakers that brought goat cheese for people to try. The library got on board, and they got a bunch of books about the climate, but also goats. They had little activity packs that kids could bring home. We had goat yoga. It was a lot. But the community loved it so much. If we were to ever discontinue this goat project, I think there would be a mutiny because they love it so much. And I got a little, so last year was our second year then. And then this year was our third. And last year I got a little too big for my britches, I think. And I was on TikTok watching, there's a local forager, I think he's out of Chippewa County, and he was showing some of the pesticides that were being used along the highway in Chippewa County. And I got insane, and I sent to the governor, to the DNR, and I was like, you guys, we don't need to use pesticides. You just need to have goats in every single county. And I saw that last year, I think the DOT sent out a press release about how they had been testing out using goats alongside of the highway for maintenance. And I was like, yes, awesome. So I'm still pushing this for a statewide thing. I think Marathon County, we are the largest county in the state by land mass. So we would need at least 4 herds, but I think the state should probably continue this project moving forward. Because not only does the community love it, it's the perfect way to kind of maintain this. The goats were here for about a month already this summer, and they took care of a bunch of things. But now the DNR has a conference starting, I think, next week in Wausau. And so our farmers are bringing the goats back. So they're going to have a little excursion to check out the goat grazing and seeing how it's going. And they're going to ask the farmers. You know, when I was talking to the farmers, they were actually really involved in some of the local kind of environmental movements, and they said the DNR was really freaked out by kind of the cattle grazing in the forest because it can be damaging. So they're trying to slowly get them on board with some of these other things. So it's really great. Just one little goat can change state policy, I think. And, you know, you're seeing it all over the place. There's sheep doing this, preventing wildfires in California. So I think you're going to see more of this. And also, like, it's just delightful. We have some apartments that we just built along the river. And people have been calling me from those apartment buildings, telling me they could hear the goats kind of bleating in the morning to each other. And it's, again, I know I'm a little obsessed. If I could show you the rest of my office, I started getting all these anonymous goats sent to me, like stuffed goats, not loud screaming goats, all kinds of things. People just loved it. So if there's any way to push your community to do this, you should, because it's just fun, but it's doing something good too. All right, I know I have other things to talk about. Yes, environmental justice. So this is something that I know is close to Andrew's heart too. But Wausau actually was the first municipality in the state to create a resolution promoting environmental justice. And so what we really wanted to do was anything that we are, you know, developing, or maybe we are working on parks, we're working on, you know, anything we're doing in the city, we want to look at that through an environmental justice lens. And, you know, this took a lot of education for our community because it's just starting to now be part of conversation, I would say, in kind of regular society. And so we had some people who came out of the woodwork and said, oh, you're just trying to push socialism and then you're going to redistribute my land. And so, you know, it was really interesting to hear the complaints. But truly what we want is for policymakers, this is largely a tool for policymakers to look at our developments, see, are we displacing people? Are we displacing habitat? Are we helping communities that need help and to be lifted up? You know, 12% of Wausau's population is Hmong descent. And so that's big. It's one of the biggest communities per capita of Hmong folks in the entire nation. So, you know, we care about making sure that we are developing equally and making sure that we're not displacing people disproportionately. So one of the easiest ways that we could figure this out is the EPA has an EJ screen, the environmental justice screen, and we are able to incorporate that into our geographic information system. Super easy if you're, you know, doing stuff like this. And so one of the little toggles that you can hit is this an environmental justice neighborhood? So when we're looking at things like that, I mean, it's super simple and obvious, but it just hadn't been done. So now we're doing it, and it's pretty cool. Yeah, greenhouse gas emissions. So both of these, all of these policies I'm talking about, some of them were my ideas, some of them were other counselors' ideas, but they all kind of ran through that sustainability committee model so that the community could be really engaged in all of this policy creation. So greenhouse gas emissions, it's not super aggressive. You know, this came out last year, maybe it was earlier this year is when we passed it. We learned a little bit from our environmental justice discussion that people were kind of freaked out. And we wanted to make sure everyone knew, like, we are doing this for our community, so that we can be stronger together, not for any other, you know, nefarious purposes that you'd try to lay at our feet. So at this point, we're just kind of benchmarking our energy use. One of the cool things we were able to do, I didn't really talk about it in any of the earlier slides, but with our federal money, all of the municipalities and counties got ARPA funding federal during COVID, and we got about $15.7 million. And we replaced every single one of our light bulbs to be high like low energy usage instead of like the old compact fluorescent, whatever we were using. So already we're saving thousands of dollars every month just by changing the light bulbs. It's wild. But we're continuing to benchmark. We have old facilities and buildings, old ass boilers, all of these things. So we're trying to figure out how much energy are we using, and looking at it through the lens of both emissions, because that's sustainability, that was their effort. But when you're trying to sell this to council members and the community, you save a ton of money. So I was on the library board for 10 years, and we did this over 10 years. We replaced every single light bulb. We saved $4,000 a month on energy costs alone. So like this was an easy sell. Okay, so our goal, I think we must have taken this from one of the state or national things, was 100% clean energy by 2050. So we know that's super not aggressive, but we memorialized it. That was part of it. And I assume that we're going to be moving forward a little bit more quickly as we find projects and funding, especially. But we started somewhere. We also wanted to make sure that we were giving the community these resources. Sometimes people don't realize that it's super easy to save energy, save a dollar, whatever. So we're pushing out, through our focus on energy partnerships, things like that. I mean, this is easy stuff, but we're all just like pulling it together in one place for people. Identify and reap cost savings. That is probably the biggest thing for the policymakers, at least on my city council. It's like, oh, we can save money, done. Because everything costs a lot. And if we can save money somewhere and then spend that doing some other cool stuff, hiring goats. That's the other thing I didn't mention. We hired 50 goats, and it was like $6,000 for an entire month of that. You can't get people to do that work, right? So it's pretty cool. We are part of the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Green Tier Legacy Program. So we are consistently looking through there, seeing how we can kind of work together on some of these projects. They have kind of semi-regular meetings to talk through what communities are doing. And then obviously the big part of this greenhouse gas emissions resolution was we want to use all the money that is becoming available through bipartisan infrastructure law, inflation reduction, all of the future and things that I'm not even listing off. There's a lot of pots of money. And actually, for any of you nerds out there, which I'm guessing if you're watching this, you're one of them, USDA has so much money. And I know that, Farm Bill is part of it, but, a lot of different funds. Secretary Vilsack is really into pushing creative ideas. So that's a really great place to look to. Oh my gosh. So this has been my life over the last, I don't know, year and a half, a little bit more, almost 2 years. In January of last year, so 2022, the DNR came to us. One of our neighboring municipalities had tested for PFAS, and they had a really hot well. And so the DNR came to us and they said, hey, we're just kind of trying to find sources, check the area. Would you be interested in testing? And so, of course, when they asked me, I was like, absolutely, we want to test. I want to know what's in our water. I want to know what we can do if it is. And, unlike our neighbors or literally anyone else in the state, it wasn't just one well for us. It was every single one of our drinking wells was contaminated with PFAS above the state health hazard index. So that was really scary. I didn't sleep for a long time. And actually, the October before we tested, I was reading some news about Eau Claire, and 50% of their wells had been contaminated. And I was like, wow, I don't know what we would do with 50% of our wells. Well, you know what? All of them here. So we got to work. The first thing I did was reach out to all of the people that I knew were working on this, all the people I didn't know. Like, I got loud. So that's one of those like helpful hints I would give for anybody is like, if you have a problem and you're a leader, reach out and say, I need help here, and you will get it. So you can see the governor here checking things out. We have our state secretary for the DNR checking things out. We opened a brand new drinking water facility last December. And we put in a temporary filtration system. And I don't know how deep in the weeds of PFAS people are, but right now our temporary solution is we have an anionic exchange, which we put in there to kind of deal with a variety of things, water quality issues to make it look nicer. But we were able to add a PFAS attracting resin. So the PFAS go in, and then we kind of were able to backwash that resin, get all the PFAS out of it, and reuse it a couple of times before the company comes and takes it out. So we're removing most of the PFAS. The laws are changing quicker than I can even wrap my mind around. Right now, we're testing for 6 more. So we just, it's a lot. So the graphs you can see on the side here are, you know, our short-term strategy and our long-term strategy. Our long-term strategy is kind of the most standard of strategies to remove PFAS. It's using granular activated carbon. And that basically just pulls out not just PFAS, but all kinds of different carbon chains. So it's great. We're doing, you can see that lead lag. The idea is that the water goes into that lead, PFAS come out, it goes into the lag, and then it goes out. So once the PFAS start breaking through that lead vessel, the lag one will pick it up and we'll be able to recharge it. We have 12 of those, and we'll be ready to build that, or we'll be ready to get that going by the end of next year. It takes a long time right now with the kind of the kind of supply chain and construction stuff. It takes a long time. So right now we're still on our temporary solution, but we're looking at this for next year. Now, we did get, when I mentioned Senator Tammy Baldwin in the chat, she is on the Senate Appropriations Committee, and she got us an earmark. I think they call it congressionally directed spending now. That's more politically correct or whatever. But we got $1.6 million thanks to Tammy Baldwin. Love her. And we also qualified for our for 70% reimbursed principal forgiveness from the DNR clean, I think it's Clean Drinking Water Loan Fund. So that's great. However, our rates in Wausau, our water rates hadn't gone up in decades. So at this point, in order to pay for all of this stuff, rates are going up 65%, which is a lot. Now it ends up being about $18 a month for the average family. But you know, it's tough right now for people, and inflation is tough. So we're trying to identify more ways to pay for some of this stuff that that will help support our ratepayers. And one of those things, we are involved in maybe 3 different programs. So if people are struggling to pay their water bills, they can sign up and get help from the state. We got 3 different ones if you live in an apartment, if you live in a home, and I think there's one special one for maybe a protected class of folks. All right, let's see the next mystery slide that I created. PFAS. Okay, so one of the things that made me super mad was that we discovered these PFAS, and there's no way for us really to find out right this second where it's coming from. It's not like other places where, oh, it's the airport. The airport, you know, used these firefighting foams and that's what did it. Or it's not, I mean, we do have a 3M company here, but it wasn't necessarily what they're producing. So, you know, I was kind of hemming and hawing. I had dozens of lawyers reach out to me the second they heard about our PFAS, like asking us to sign on to their tort lawsuits and all this stuff. And I was like, I'm not ready for this. I don't even know where the PFAS are coming from. So finally, in May, I brought forward this attorney. He's with Napoli Law Firm out of New York. He's very well respected in the world of these large-scale tort lawsuits. And the city signed on. We signed on to this lawsuit, not just one, it's about 4 of them. And we're suing the manufacturers of PFAS because they knew for decades that this was damaging to human health. But they kept it from us. And, you know, one of the quirks of the federal government, and any government maybe, is that they were relying on the companies themselves to regulate themselves and tell them what kind of chemicals they were making. So of course, like if you're business minded and you're creating something that's a, you know, hot seller, what, you know, like it took a long time. And, you know, if you want to really dive into the rabbit hole, which I wasn't ready to dive until this year even, but Dark Waters, the Mark Ruffalo documentary, oh my gosh, it will enrage you. So watch that. But we're signed on. We got 4 lawsuits here. we're part of those big settlements. And, you know, our governor and our state attorney general signed on to the state lawsuits. And, you know, there's some hemming and hawing over there too. And people keep asking me like, oh, the AG is rejecting to the settlement that you were excited about. What do you think? And I was like, it's good. It's good for us. You know, we would get a lot of money, but we would like more money. How about that? So we got to address this problem. It's hugely expensive for our people. So we're still waiting. This could take years, but we're expecting some action, at least on one of the lawsuits, pretty quickly here. Oh, and this is the nice thing. I think maybe I decided I wanted to end on something nice and not like cutthroat, like rah, I'm, you know, Erin Brockovich. So one of the things that we have is our brand new drinking water facility. And I thought, how freaking cool would it be if we could power it with the sun? And so that's kind of what we're moving towards right now is we want to build a solar array. And we're looking at different funding sources and all that. But first, one of the things, you know, our environmental justice resolution talks a lot about community engagement and making sure that we're doing right by our community. And so we are now in that stage of engaging our community in this. I put together a solar array task force, which is studying both, you know, the variety of arrays we could do, how big they would get, how we could make it look beautiful for the neighborhood, talk to the neighbors. You know, right now, the neighbors who are directly close to the land where we would build it are not the happiest of campers. So, you know, I mean, that's one of the things you come across in local government that's always surprising to me is like, you're doing some really cool things and then all of a sudden someone hates it and you're like, whoa. So we're slowing it down a little bit just to talk to the neighbors, make sure we're doing the right things, make sure we can pay for it. You know, this isn't, it's not a $17 million granular activated carbon system. It's a $3 million solar array. So it's a little bit different, but we still want to do it. We just got to figure out the right way to get it done that meets the needs of our community in addition to our drinking water treatment facility. Oh yeah, so buses, you know, we struggle with transit system in general, you know, for decades. We've been cut over and over and over again. And you know, our neighboring communities aren't engaged in our transit system anymore either. And we just hired a brand new super aggressive transit director. He's amazing. He was born in 1994, blows my mind. And you know, he was applying for some grants to get some new buses. And right now our facility, our transit facility is, I mean, older than me, and it's not made for electric buses. So we've been kind of making do with diesel, you know, you'll hear the clean diesel. And when he applied for his yearly grant funding for this, for new buses, we got nothing, because the federal government is uninterested in funding diesel buses anymore, which perfect sense. I totally get it. So now we are looking forward and we're trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? First of all, you know, an electric bus kind of facility is a little bit different than your traditional garage. You know, you need a catwalk because you're kind of dealing with stuff on the roof of these buses and not just like opening them up to get at the diesel engine. So we're looking at all of that stuff. We're looking ahead. We know that diesel's days are numbered, which is really awesome. But you know, government moves slowly and until it doesn't. So we're getting ready to figure out how we're going to make this work. And we have a couple of projects in the hopper as it relates to kind of you know, maintenance kind of garage stuff. So we're trying to figure out how do we add our transit garage and maintenance to this too. So that's what's next. Super excited about that. And actually, one of the interesting things, I just had a conversation about a few hours ago from somebody who wants to talk about some funding as it relates to direct funding of solar and renewable energy from federal government. You know, they used to kind of try and get private entities, private business to get the tax credits. And, you know, governments don't pay taxes like that. so we could never reap the benefits of these tax credits. Well, now they're looking at direct pay from the federal government for this. So we're going to start talking about how do we capitalize on some of this stuff to get this money. Really excited about it, but obviously there's a lot of things to know. I'm not an attorney. My background is philosophy and communications. So it's been a really fun time getting to go and getting to know. So I don't know if I have any more slides, but thank you. I think, yeah, that's it. Thank you. If there are questions, I would love to have them.
Thank you so much, Katie. That was really, really informative. I just want to quickly say that, so we're at about the end of the time that we allotted, but if our speakers can stay on for a couple questions, that would be really great. We just want to remind anyone who does have to run, you'll get a full recording of this, so don't worry. If that's okay with our speakers, we have 2 or 3 questions that we want to quickly ask. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Evie, and she has a question for you all. So Evie, take it away.
As I mentioned in the chat, I'm a recent graduate from the University of Wisconsin-Superior, where I got my master's in sustainable management. So I'd just like to ask that, given that Biden has committed the US to 50 to 52% greenhouse gas emissions reductions by 2030 and net zero by 2050, and the current federal actions are not yet enough to reach these goals, what do you see as the next major priorities in climate legislation? This goes to all of our speakers.
I feel like Andrew is the policy wonk here.
Well, this is a really good question. Thank you, Evie. I think, one of the things to point out is that a lot can be done on the federal agency side of things in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So you'll notice over the summer, and it's continuing that, for example, EPA is looking at soot rules and how to reduce the emissions from medium and heavy duty trucks, which are only 12% of vehicles on the road, but account for over 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. They're looking at cars being having stricter emissions regulations. So there's actually a lot that can be done outside of legislation, but still by the administration. And that doesn't just deal with EPA. The Interior is looking at how to manage our national forests, which include our national forests are so large it would be about the size of Texas. So thinking about what does resilient and climate policy look like and how we manage our federal lands. There's a lot that can be done at that level. So to me, this is kind of an all hands on deck approach. I think more legislation will be needed at some point. But there's other pieces to this that I think can get us to these goals even faster.
And I think too, like when I think about the name of the organization you represent, Change the Chamber, like one of the big things is that like we can individually act, as, our communities even, but like we really need some of these corporations who are creating the pollution, who are creating products that are just end up landfilled. Like we have to figure out how they take it back. They have to we can't keep producing and then landfilling this stuff. Like we got to work with these companies so that they can take back these products. We can't, this plastic bag thing is insane to me. Anyway.
Do you have a response, or turn it back to Will?
I'm reading your comments and it makes me so happy.
Yep, and for our audience that is going to be watching, we had a couple audience members suggest the need for grid interconnections for renewable energy projects and pushing for updated FERC regulations and circular economy. So thank you for the answers, and thank you, Evie. So this is going to be a question for Katie and Andrew. Where have you each seen the largest improvement in your city since taking office? And this is a generic question. It can be environmental, it can be anything, just anything you want to kind of share about your city for to highlight.
You've been around for 14 years, Andrew. How? Obviously,
love
you're
it.
doing something.
Actually, I would say environmental is probably the largest change we've seen in Eau Claire. Um, we took an aggressive approach to looking at sustainability and issues around sustainability in 2013 or 14, the new commission. We took actions against our energy producer, which is XL Energy. They were kicking and screaming about wanting to transition to more clean energy. And we basically mobilized from our city government, but through all of our activists in the community, and took them to task and said, we want more clean energy options. They've since committed themselves to even more ambitious goals than the US government and then our city. And so, there's an opportunity to see how corporations can actually change their mindset with enough public pressure, which is what we did. And then passing our climate action campaign, our climate action goals in 2018, it was that really geared our entire city to thinking about from transportation to how many trees we're planting to energy use, and this is for our entire community. We have goals for 100% zero emissions by 2050. I think those will hopefully be updated as well. But I think that's probably the area that I have seen our community change its mindset around what needs to happen, and it really impacts all parts of the community. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of work, but it's also a lot of fun to know that you can, together with people, really make change in your own community. So
Yeah, I mean, I feel like so much there's been a lot of effort put into like community gathering spaces. And so, there's been that effort. I know housing is a struggle across the board. But we've been promoting development. We've been, I just went to Eau Claire and I was so jealous. There's like a trillion different complexes going up, and you can tell they're doing really cool things, and they're targeting certain areas especially. So we're doing all that same stuff, and I think the community is the part that's kind of come along with us. I think in the past you might have had people like me saying things about using sustainable ideas, and it was kind of like, oh, there goes the town hippie doing whatever. But now it's pretty normal. Like, people will talk about this normally. Their kids especially the kids are leading those adults, man. I love those kids. I want to hire them to be our PR people. I mean, they're the best. I mean, so I think that's what's changing here.
could I add one other thing that relates to chambers of commerce?
Yeah.
And it kind of comes together, but about 15 years ago, we as a community really changed the mindset from away from like what's traditionally seen as sort of lower taxes and get government out of the way, to saying, what can the city government, what can the community do to make Eau Claire a place that people want to be? What are those things? And the chamber was a big advocate on that. So the chamber actually in our community came around and said, like, we do need park spaces. We do need more bike trails. Like, we want to make it walk friendly. We want to clean up some of the industries that are smelling up the whole downtown. So the chamber itself was actually a big part of this. We blossomed into an arts community and really feature the arts here. And so that has helped us now to the point where we are, which is Eau Claire is now the second fastest growing community, large community in Wisconsin, behind Madison. And it's because people see opportunity and sort of this beauty of the place where we live. But the chamber, I want to say, was a huge part of that, saying, what are those things that are quality of life first, and business will be attracted to those places if it's a good place to live. And I like that way of thinking about it.
Yeah, that's exactly the point. I met somebody who moved here from Colorado, and they said, I am a climate refugee. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And they said that they were done with the wildfires. And so, that started getting me thinking even more broadly about this stuff. Like, we are so lucky to live in Wisconsin, where we have these resources, at least for now. Why wouldn't we do our damnedest to preserve them and make sure that we are able to continue to be these great communities? Eau Claire, Wausau, Madison, all of it, Superior. Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you for your answers. That was really good. I really want you guys to be my mayor and councilman. Just
Thank
listening,
you.
I'm like, wow, you sound like great places to live, and you guys are great representatives of your towns, and I'm sure you make your constituents happy. So our next question, and we'll start with Katie on this one. What can we do to help environmental justice efforts in Wisconsin? And Aaron, if you have anything to add at the end of, when Katie and Andrew answer, please do.
So what can we help to advance it? I think first of all is kind of demystifying the concept, right? Sometimes people see these terms and they're like, sounds like communism. And like, that's what we came across, right? Like that's the problem. Like, no, actually, we want to make sure that everybody benefits from the kinds of developments and things that we're doing here. So I think, being able to continue talking about it all the time, which is what we're doing when we put it in something like a GIS system, or we memorialize it in a resolution. So I think just continuously talking through these things is really important. But Wausau or Wisconsin now has its first office of environmental justice. I had the privilege of meeting not the main person, but the kind of, I don't know, undersecretary. I don't know what we're calling them right now. And they're wonderful. The woman I met was she was right on every single note, and she was in there with meetings with the DNR and with me and with the attorneys, making sure that we were looking at the right things when we're talking about this. One of my big projects right now is lead pipe removal and making sure that all the old houses were 150 years old, that people aren't subjecting themselves to lead. And she really helped us think through like which neighborhoods do we target first. And that's really it, like making sure that we're targeting the most vulnerable people and that they are benefiting and we're not just, steamrolling over them.
Yeah, thanks so much, Katie, for kind of going into that. And I think, as an organizer for the Environmental Defense Fund, one thing that I've tried to do, and this is broadly across the Midwest, is think about tribal voices and communities of color, people who may not always be represented, and actually working very explicitly to try to make sure that their voices are heard in the process, but also heard publicly. And that's one thing that we've really tried to push for is kind of this recognition that that certain communities are more often the brunt of environmental decisions that are made. In our community, one example that we recently had come up was a California company wanted to come and buy 10% of our city's drinking water and ship it out. And this is a
It's
perfect
plastic
example.
bottles, man.
In 3 million plastic bottles every day.
I hate
And
it.
so this is a perfect example. What got people and why this is an environmental justice issue is the fact that, well, first of all, half of our wells are already shut down because of contamination. But then on top of it, the average homeowner who's already struggling to make ends meet was going to be paying more per gallon than this California bottling company under the proposal. And so these are the kind of things that, when I think about environmental justice and what does that mean? It means that we're recognizing sort of these impacts of communities of color and impacts for people who are least able to afford to bear these burdens. And so we just absolutely said no. Now we, in fact, went the other way, and our community has, I believe it's one of the first in the Midwest, put together a water stewardship and sustainability program that we're going to be launching in our entire community to say how do we want to think about who gets water, who is prioritized in this equation, what does water cost, how do we make sure you protect it for future generations. So we've actually in a year's time swung the other way and said we better be ready for the next 5 bottling companies over the decade, and other states wanting our water and et cetera. So environmental justice is a lot of things, but it's really being intentional to me, thinking about impacts on people.
Oh my gosh, can we be your partner in this water preservation thing? I want to.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that, because actually I think that this planning effort we're about to go through with our entire community, I'm hoping other communities in Wisconsin kind of see this as a model and adopt it. We put a lot of thought ahead of time into kind of how we want to shape that narrative and support other communities. So 100%.
I love it.
Even brokering deals here at CTC's live events. It's great. They're that productive. Great answers. And we have multiple members of our EJ team in the chat, and I'm sure they're all like smiling ear to ear and super inspired by all of what you guys just said. And I just want to give a shameless plug to our EJ team. You can find more information on our website. I've put it in the chat a bunch, but I'll just say it out loud for members who are going to be watching this offline. www.changethechamber.org. And then you can click through our entire website. All of our information's on there, and then our different coalition or teams. And I want to give a plug to any students or youth who are in the who are watching this and they want to get more involved in EJ. Definitely check out our website to find out how you can get more involved. It's a huge part of our team, and they do great work, just like Katie and Andrew are doing. So if it's okay, we have time for one last question, I hope. We'll start with Andrew on this one, since it's a little bit more agricultural based, and then Katie, if you have anything to add, please do. So in regards to supporting farmers, since big ag is an issue, did the IRA focus on small farmers in any way? Did the IRA focus on small farmers in any way, or is there something you think we should be doing to help with that issue?
This is a question I don't fully know the answer to, but one thing that I do know is that greenhouse gas emissions from big farms are, a really big problem. And so it's kind of one of those things where it does help to also have conservation efforts happening on bigger farms. At the same time, like this is something that I think we need to encourage Congress to ensure, which is that farmers that need the funds the most and can least afford are the ones that are getting more. So I think that's, I don't know how it delineates necessarily in the programs, who gets what, but I think there is room for, if you're curious, look up the House members of the committee, the Agriculture Committee. Maybe you have one in your district or in your state is on there, and reach out to them and say, look, I'd love to see the Farm Bill focus more on small family farms, like the one that I grew up on in Wisconsin, where every dollar really goes a long way. So that's a good question, and thanks for raising it.
I haven't really been digging into the Farm Bill. We are 50% free and reduced lunch in my community. So that's one of those things that we focus on as far as, the nutrition aspects of it. But yeah, I mean, we want it all. We want to protect our small farmers. One of the things that's special about our community is that we produce 98% of the North America's ginseng right here in Marathon County. So, I'm going to start rambling a little bit, so I'm going to try to keep myself to a minimum here. But one of the things that I think a lot about is that, with our fights with China, for instance, the tariffs, things like that, like those disruptions in trade really intimately affect us. And so how do we, when we're thinking about our environment and things like that, how do we make sure that we're lifting up not just our local economy, but like bringing that good news and all of that, those good efforts globally too? I'm still trying to wrap my head around what that means for us and for our globe, but yeah.
Okay. Thank you for those answers to all of those questions. And thank you guys so much for your time today. It was so great. And I just want to say, Priscilla in the chat, thank you for putting the link to the EJ team. So I'll just quickly say that again, www.changethechamber.org/environmental-justice to get to that website. And I would like to offer, Aaron, do you have any final thoughts? Do you have anything you would like to say? I know most of the questions kind of went to the other two, but we'd like to extend a little bit of time for you to share anything you'd like.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, I really appreciate it. And, I think that like a lot of the leading on this work is really going to come from, local leaders. So I'm really appreciative of all the work that like Katie and Andrew are doing, because it takes partnerships at every level. And while Climate Action Campaign primarily works on like the federal level, like it takes federal and local and state partnerships all to make sure that this, investment, this climate work is actually reaching these communities. So I think it's just really exhilarating to see all the work that's going on in Wisconsin. So I'm really appreciative of this meeting today.
Thank you, Aaron. And once again, I'd really like to thank Aaron, Andrew, and Katie for your time and for your presentations and your thoughts. It was a wonderful event. As someone who's not from Wisconsin, I learned a tremendous amount, and I'm so envious of your constituents. They're very lucky. And I'd like to thank Evie for helping to organize this event. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming today, especially since, this is later in the evening. Thank you guys all so much, and all the CTC fellows who are here in support. And again, I'd like to thank Priscilla and Deborah for their great leadership and mentorship. So I wish everybody to have a great night and upcoming holiday weekend. Enjoy and be safe. And thank you all so much. And again, this will all be recorded. It's being recorded and it will be sent to you. And please follow those links to all of those websites to find more great information. Thank you all.